Look at me right now. Look into my eyes. Can you see it? That thing lurking behind the surface, the tension in my jaw, the micro-expressions that betray what's hidden beneath. You feel it too, don't you? That constant pressure crushing your chest from the inside. They told us to be rocks in the storm, immovable and unbreakable. But what happens when the rock begins to crack? Today, I'm going to show you the darkest truth about male anxiety, a pain so deeply embedded in our collective unconscious that most men live their entire lives without naming it. By the end of this, you'll understand the psychological prison millions of men are trapped in right now. Some watching this will feel exposed, others vindicated. But I promise you this, what I'm about to reveal will forever change how you understand the male psyche. Have you ever noticed how society celebrates male strength while simultaneously turning away from male vulnerability? The uncomfortable truth is that we've created a world where men must bear the unbearable without showing a single crack. Be a man, they say. But what does that really mean? It means to suffer in silence. It means to carry the weight without complaint. It means to die piece by piece on the inside while maintaining a perfect facade. Consider this. When a woman expresses anxiety, she's often met with support and understanding. When a man does the same, something else happens. The world becomes suddenly uncomfortable. People shift in their seats. They look away, or worse. They offer that toxic cocktail of dismissal disguised as encouragement. You got this, man. Toughen up. I used to think this was just my experience, until I discovered the statistics. Did you know that men are almost 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women? But they're significantly less likely to be diagnosed with anxiety or depression. Not because they don't have these conditions, but because they've been conditioned to mask them so effectively that even they can't recognize what's happening inside their own minds. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychoanalyst, would see this as the tragic suppression of what he called the anima, the feminine aspects of the male psyche. When men reject vulnerability, emotion, and sensitivity in themselves, they're not becoming stronger. They're fracturing their own souls. Think about the last time you saw a man break down. Really break down. Not the single dignified tear at a funeral, but a complete emotional collapse. Can't remember? There's a reason for that. From childhood, we train our boys to compartmentalize emotional pain. Don't cry like a girl, we tell them. And so they learn to swallow their tears, to push the pain down deeper, to pretend they're fine when they're being torn apart from within. The insidious truth about male anxiety is that it doesn't look like anxiety at all. It looks like anger. It looks like emotional detachment. It looks like workaholism. It looks like risk-taking behavior and substance abuse. It looks like everything except what it actually is. A desperate cry for connection in a world that demands men remain islands unto themselves. I once interviewed a former combat veteran who told me something I'll never forget. He said, "I wasn't afraid of dying in combat. I was afraid of living with what I'd seen." Yet for years, he told no one. He smiled at family gatherings. He maintained his stoic demeanor. He was the rock everyone expected him to be. Until one day, the rock shattered. This isn't just about individual men making individual choices. This is about a collective psychological wound we've inflicted on half our population. A wound that bleeds silently, unacknowledged, festering beneath the surface of our society. The true horror of male anxiety is not just that men suffer. It's that they suffer alone, believing their failures for experiencing normal human emotions. They believe the lie that their worth is tied to their invulnerability. And so they build walls around their hearts so high and so thick that eventually, they can't find their way back to themselves. Jung would recognize this as the shadow at work, the repressed aspects of ourselves that grow more powerful and destructive the more we deny them. The anxiety men aren't allowed to express doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes the monster in the basement of the male psyche, growing stronger in darkness. I want you to think about the men in your life right now. Your father, brother, son, friend, partner. Behind their composed expressions and casual reassurances that everything's fine, there may be a storm raging that they don't have the language to describe. A storm they've been told since childhood they must weather alone. The most dangerous lie we've told men is that their strength lies in their ability to endure suffering without support. But true strength has never been about bearing pain alone. True strength lies in the courage to be vulnerable, to reach for connection when the world tells you to stand apart. Here's what most people won't tell you. When men finally break, and they do break, it's rarely a single dramatic moment. It's a slow, silent erosion of the self, a gradual numbing, a progressive disconnection from everything that once brought joy and meaning. The human spirit can only endure so much pressure before it begins to deform. Society has created a tragic paradox for men. We demand they be providers and protectors, yet deny them the very emotional resources they need to fulfill these roles sustainably. We expect them to be emotionally available to others while punishing them for having emotions themselves. The anxiety that results from this impossible position manifests in the body. Tension headaches, digestive issues, insomnia, chronic pain. The body keeps the score of the trauma the mind refuses to acknowledge. And make no mistake, it is trauma to be denied your full humanity. Jung understood that the psyche naturally seeks balance. When we force men to repress entire categories of human experience, we create a dangerous psychological imbalance. The rejected parts don't disappear. They go underground, emerging in distorted forms that cause suffering to the man, and often to those around him. What would Jung say about the modern man's predicament? He would point to our collective failure to provide healthy initiation rites and models of integrated masculinity. In traditional cultures, elder men taught younger men how to navigate their emotions, how to be both strong and vulnerable, how to carry responsibility without being crushed by it. Where are those elders now? Instead, we have left boys to piece together masculinity from fragments. Tough guy movie characters, athletes who play through the pain, fathers who themselves never learned how to access their emotional lives. Is it any wonder so many men find themselves strangers to their own hearts? The shocking truth is that male stoicism, this quality we've elevated to a cardinal virtue, is killing men. Not metaphorically, literally, through suicide, through stress-related illness, through the slow death of addiction. The mandate to remain unbreakable is breaking men by the millions. I spoke with a psychologist who specializes in men's mental health. She told me that nearly every man who comes to her practice, regardless of their presenting issue, shares the same core experience. A profound sense of isolation. Not just physical isolation, but emotional isolation so complete that many have forgotten what genuine connection feels like. What's particularly devastating is how many men have internalized the belief that their anxiety is a moral failure, rather than a natural human response to unrealistic expectations. They believe their suffering indicates weakness, not humanity. And so they drive themselves harder, push themselves further, demanding an impossible perfection from themselves that they would never expect from anyone else. The statistics on men's mental health are alarming enough, but what statistics can't capture is the qualitative suffering, the lived experience of moving through the world behind a mask so convincing that eventually you forget it's a mask at all. I remember interviewing a high-powered executive who seemed to have everything: wealth, status, family. When the recorder was off, he confessed something to me. "I haven't felt anything real in years," he said. "I go through the motions, I say the right things, but inside, there's nothing. Just emptiness and this constant grinding worry that someday everyone will see through me." That's the true face of male anxiety. Not dramatic panic attacks, but a quiet, persistent alienation from one's own life. Jung would recognize this as what he called living an unlived life, going through the motions of existence without authentic engagement with one's true self. The persona, the social mask, has completely overtaken the individual, leaving him a stranger to himself. Consider how we respond when women voice anxiety. We offer support, validation, connection. When men voice the same feelings, our response is radically different. We offer solutions, distractions, or subtle indications that this display of vulnerability is making us uncomfortable. Is it any wonder men learn to swallow their pain rather than speak it? What's most heartbreaking is how this pattern perpetuates itself. Boys learn from the men around them that emotional stoicism is the hallmark of masculinity. And so another generation grows up crippled by the same toxic expectations, unable to access the full range of their humanity. This isn't just a personal tragedy, it's a collective one. Think of all the gifts lost to the world when men are forced to amputate essential parts of themselves. Think of the creativity, the compassion, the connection sacrificed on the altar of a narrow, rigid concept of manhood. Jung believed that wholeness, not perfection, was the goal of psychological development. Wholeness means integrating all aspects of the self, including vulnerability, uncertainty, and yes, anxiety. The truly strong man isn't the one who never breaks. It's the one who has broken and learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, but courage in its purest form. I've spoken with men who've reached the breaking point, who could no longer maintain the facade of invulnerability. Almost universally, they describe the experience as both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because they've spent their lives believing that to break is to fail. Liberating because in that breaking, they finally discover their authentic selves beneath the mask. What would it look like if we created a world where men could acknowledge their anxiety without shame? Where seeking help wasn't seen as weakness, but as wisdom? Where emotional literacy was considered as essential to manhood as physical strength? Perhaps the most dangerous aspect of male anxiety is how effectively men have been trained to hide it, even from themselves. They've learned to rationalize their suffering as normal, to dismiss their emotional needs as unimportant, to push through pain that should be addressed. And we, as a society, have been complicit in this self-destruction by celebrating this denial as strength. The painful irony is that the very vulnerability men are taught to avoid is the gateway to their deepest strength. It's through acknowledging our wounds that we learn to heal them. It's through facing our fears that we discover our courage. It's through allowing ourselves to break that we learn how to become whole. Jung would see this epidemic of male anxiety as evidence of a profound imbalance in our collective psyche. We have elevated masculine qualities like stoicism, autonomy, and control to such heights that we've created a psychological environment hostile to basic human needs for connection, expression, and emotional authenticity. I want to tell you about a moment that changed my understanding of this issue forever. I was sitting across from a man who embodied traditional masculinity in every way. Physically imposing, professionally successful, emotionally reserved. We were discussing male mental health in abstract terms when suddenly his voice cracked. "No one has ever asked me how I'm really doing," he said, and meant it. In that moment, I saw decades of unacknowledged pain surface. It was like watching a dam break in slow motion. What haunts me is knowing how many men are living inside that dam, holding back oceans of unexpressed emotion, believing they have no other choice. They've been told that to be a man means to bear unbearable pressure, without complaint. They haven't been told what to do when the pressure exceeds human capacity. Consider how we talk about male privilege, without acknowledging this profound disadvantage. The emotional poverty that has been normalized for men. Yes, men benefit from structural advantages in many contexts, but they pay for these with the currency of their emotional lives. Is that really privilege, or is it another form of constraint? The expectations placed on men create a perfect storm for anxiety. Be strong, but not domineering. Be vulnerable, but not weak. Be successful, but don't prioritize work over family. Be emotionally available, but never needy. These contradictory demands create a no-win situation where men are constantly at risk of failing at masculinity itself. Jung understood that integration of opposites is essential for psychological health. Yet our cultural definition of masculinity demands that men reject entire dimensions of human experience. The result is men who are half alive, cut off from essential aspects of themselves, existing in a state of perpetual internal conflict. The most heartbreaking conversations I've had are with fathers who are desperately trying to raise sons differently than they were raised, to give their boys permission to feel, to hurt, to need. Yet these same fathers often lack the emotional vocabulary to model what they're trying to teach. They're attempting to speak a language they were never allowed to learn. What we're facing isn't just a crisis of individual men struggling with anxiety. We're witnessing the inevitable outcome of a collective delusion. The delusion that human beings can thrive while denying fundamental human needs. Men haven't failed to be strong enough. We've failed to recognize what true strength actually requires. If you're watching this, and you're a man who recognizes himself in these words, I want you to know something. That pain you carry, that anxiety that follows you like a shadow, it isn't weakness. It's your humanity asserting itself against impossible expectations. The problem isn't you. The problem is a definition of manhood so narrow that no real human being could ever fulfill it without breaking. And if you love a man who's struggling beneath the weight of expectations he can never voice, understand that behind his silence may be a lifetime of training and emotional suppression so thorough that he may not even have words for what he's feeling. Your patience, your presence without demand, may be the only safe harbor he's ever known. Jung would remind us that true transformation is never easy. It requires confronting our shadows, questioning our most basic assumptions, and having the courage to live authentically, even when that authenticity challenges cultural norms. For men to heal from this collective wound, they must undertake this hero's journey, not away from vulnerability, but toward it. The path forward isn't simple. It requires nothing less than reimagining masculinity itself, not as the absence of vulnerability, but as the courage to embrace the full spectrum of human experience. It means creating spaces where men can speak their fears without judgment, where they can learn the language of emotion that many were never taught. If you take nothing else from this, remember this. Behind the stoic faces of the men you know, behind their reassurances that everything is fine, there may be oceans of unacknowledged pain. A simple question, asked with genuine care. How are you really doing? Might be the lifeline they've been waiting for. Has this conversation made you uncomfortable? Good. Discomfort is often the first step toward transformation. The question now is whether we have the courage to move through that discomfort toward a more whole vision of what it means to be human, regardless of gender. If something I've said resonates with your experience, share it in the comments. Your voice matters in this conversation. Your story might be the one that helps another man feel less alone. In a world that tells men to stand apart, perhaps the most revolutionary act is to stand together, acknowledging both our strength and our vulnerability as parts of the same whole. As Jung would see it, the epidemic of male anxiety reveals a profound imbalance not just in individual men, but in our collective understanding of humanity itself. The path to healing lies not in men becoming more stoic, more controlled, more traditionally masculine. It lies in expanding our definition of masculinity to include the full range of human experience, including the courage to break when breaking is what's needed. Has this shifted something in how you understand the men in your life? Or perhaps how you understand yourself? Let me know in the comments below.